Good morning, everybody. My name is Bryn Hurren. Welcome to the Joint Audit and Standards Committee. May I first of all just remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that your microphones are turned off when not in use, that you do not interrupt other speakers, that if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. Additionally, we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the Modern Gov app. I would like to remind everybody present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to have the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and for other training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. Now, in attendance today from the officers, we have Melissa Evans, Director of Corporate Resources, Jen Robinson, the Monitoring Officer. Callum Watland is not here. We have Mike Hurst, Assistant Manager, Financial Accountant. Mike's first meeting. Welcome, Mike. John Snell, Corporate Manager, Internal Audit. Sarah Wilcock, Director of Customs, Digital Transformation and Improvement. Joe Hobbs, Corporate Manager of Strategic Policy, and Teresa Fairbairn, the Risk Management Lead. We also have in attendance Councillor Andy Mellon, the Mid-Suffolk District Council Member for Performance and Resilience, and Alistair McGraw, Baber District Council Cabinet Member for Customers, Digital Transformation and Improvement. Welcome, everybody. I'll move to the meeting itself now. Apologies for absent. Bethany, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Simon Dowling and Councillor Isabel Rees.
Thank you. Any declaration of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests by members? If so, let me know, please, now. No, you're all good. JIC 23/11 to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of September. That's for accuracy of the minutes. Can I have a proposer, please? Oh, there's loads. We'll take John, and seconder, the other John. John Matheson? Yep. John Whitehead to propose, John Matheson to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Councillor Patchett, may I take your vote verbally? Oh. Councillor Marriott, may I take your vote verbally, please? Thank you, Chair. That is 6 votes for and 2 abstentions, so that's carried.
Thank you very much, Bethany. Do we have any petitions?
None received, Chair.
Questions by the public?
None received, Chair.
And questions by councillors?
None received, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll get on to the bulk of the meeting now. JIC 23/12, Management Half yearly report. And I think that's Mike to take us through that one, please. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. So, the Treasury Management Report, you were pleased to hear, given its nature, is not a particularly exhilarating one this time. I think we'd be in trouble if it was. So I'll give you the highlights and be happy to take any questions. Given the economic environment at the moment, with high inflation, increasing unemployment, plummeting consumer confidence and high interest rates, so they've recently been held at 5.25%, you were pleased to hear that Bayberg's operated in accordance with the approved Treasury management strategy and complied with all the Treasury management indicators.
Mike, I can't hear you.
I do apologise. Is that better? Shall I start again? Okay. So Bayberg's operates in accordance with all the Treasury management indicators and operates in accordance with the Treasury management strategy. Ms Suffolk has done the same, save for one breach of for one day, which amounted to having too much money in the bank account for one day, with negligible impact. The credit risk scores were all within the benchmark A-rated credit ratings. Given the parlous times, we've operated prudently and cautiously, with Bayberg's overall debt reduced by 9.2 million and Mid Suffolk's debt reduced by 10.1 million. This brings their borrowing requirement to 112 million for Bayberg and 100 million for Mid Suffolk. Over to investments, Bayberg's investment balances range between 12.5 million and 23.5 million. Mid Suffolk's investment balances correspondingly range between 11.2 million and 25.1 million. The movements being down to time differences between income and expenditure. One point to note is that our average rate of return is significantly higher than the comparable range of our advisor, our link closes other clients. As a highlight, each council tax has 11 million of externally managed pooled equity, property and multi-asset funds, where short-term security and liquidity are lesser considerations, and the primary objectives instead are regular revenue income and long-term price stability. Since the date of the initial investments, these have generated a total income return of 3.68 million for Bayberg and 3.53 million for Mid Suffolk, an average return for the period of 3.93%. I think this covers the points of note from the Treasury report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, questions please from the council. Anything you want to improve or unhappy with, or for clarifications? Councillor McLaren, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got quite a few, but I'm happy to go with my first one and then allow the other.
Well, go for a couple and then
Okay, right. Thank you very much, Chair. In terms of regulatory oversight, which we find in the report, we've got the SIPFA code, we've got quality reporting to the Treasury, and we've got a joint training management strategy. Can you advise me if there is any external regulatory body? I mean, I was around in the days of the Audit Commission. Have we today got that sort of external regulatory body that oversees Treasury management in each council? Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you. There's the SIPFA code, which we're obliged to comply with, and so we're measured against that. That's an external body which measures our investment strategy.
Just come back on that. So there is at no point there could be somebody from outside coming in to make sure that our reports are accurate?
Well, again, We rely on external advisors, Arlene Close, for all our strategies. They've got great skill in the workplace. But SIFA are an external body which set various indicators and measures which we have to comply with. And so, in effect, they're the policemen for this and make sure that we operate prudently and well.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll go on to my second question. Thank you. On page 18, 2.18, there's an advice against lending to two specific councils. Now, can you advise me if that's part of the PWLB scheme, or is it a form of local authority borrowing? I wasn't quite clear about that. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. No, so this is not part of the PWLB borrowing. This is just local authority to local authority lending, and the credit ratings are done through Arlene Close as well. So we make sure that we don't lend to any councils that are below a credit rating that's not acceptable.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I hope I'm reading this correctly. On page 20. The table, I think, says that we decided to pay 8 million off the 90 million loan at a rate of interest rate of 2.6. Why did we choose to do that rather than paying more off the short-term borrowing amount, which has clearly got a higher interest rate? Because that would obviously save us money.
Yeah, so the loans have maturity dates. So when we take a loan out with a local authority, even if it's a long-term loan, it's got a maturity date. So if we were to repay that any earlier, there would be penalties for that. And because the rates were so low when we took them out, it seemed prudent to let that kind of run to maturity. So it's usually the maturity date that fixes when we repay the loan rather than any decision we take internally, if you like.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of gently, for new members, say that the astonishingly large £94 million of borrowing, that is essentially the mortgage on our council houses. So it's not quite as alarming as it might look. Thank you.
No, Chair.
How many more?
I've got two more,
Yeah,
but I'm happy to go with...
no.
Okay,
So do your two and then we'll go back
thank you.
to our councillor days.
On page 23, we see the PWLB facility. Can somebody advise me which sort of projects we might use that for within Baber District Council? Thank you.
Yep, so that would be a decision we would probably take with any capital scheme that comes through to a council for decision. So the recommendation would probably have attached to it that we would enter into a PWLB loan and the rate and the maturity of that loan. So it would be a decision that would be taken.
Thank you, Melissa. And my second question, it actually came up in my ward. When we look at the two councils in these papers, there are distinct differences between the level of monies available. I know there are good reasons for those differences, but because it came up in a public arena, I would like to clarify what are the reasons that Baber finds itself in a different financial position, say, to Mid-Suffolk? Just very simply, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a historical one as well. So I think if we look back over the years, Baber had a history of freezing council tax for a number of years. So that is a loss of cumulative income over the years that decision was taken to freeze the council tax. There are other factors that play into it as well. So because Mid-Suffolk has had a lot more housing growth, they've benefited from a large amount of new homes bonus that has been received every year. It started off 6 years new homes bonus that we were receiving, then it dropped to 4 years worth. So it's quite a significant amount of money. And so you've got council tax, you've got new homes bonus, and also the business rates for Baber are, you generate more income from business rates as well. So those are really your three funding sources for both councils, and they are very different.
Thank you, Jo. I just felt it was important because it was raised in a public space. The public can listen to this meeting and read the agenda papers, and I think people need answers, actually. Thank you very much.
Okay, Chair. So on page 28, I have a question. Could you confirm that we're going to respect the legislation which is coming in on that point 1.15, and what exposure is Mid-Suffolk going to take in terms of the write-down which we will be implementing then? Thank you.
Yeah, we certainly will be adhering to that legislation if that does come through for us to follow, so we certainly will do. What will be the impact will be whatever the value of those investments are at the time. So at the year end they'll be valued, and then any loss we'll need to account for that correctly. Now I can't articulate what the double entry accounting and all of that is at the moment. We'll need to explore into that a bit more, but it may mean that we need to set some money aside to cover that loss should that come through. So we will be working that through if that legislation does become a requirement.
Thank you, because at the moment, rough calculations looks like it's about 1.6 million. So that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Yeah, I'm pleased to see on page 32 that we've now divested ourselves from Funding Circle, but I just wondered what the actual process was in terms of chasing the outstanding bad debts. Is that something that we do ourselves or through Funding Circle?
Yeah, that's managed through Funding Circle, so they do actively try and recover the debts on our behalf. So yeah, they do undertake that work.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, on Councillor Davies' question there, I think the paragraph 117 is suggesting that we won't need to be obliged. Sorry, we won't be obliged to put the loss into our accounts at the moment, and the Minister wants to confirm that.
Yeah, at the moment it's not a requirement, but obviously we are planning for and thinking ahead to should that come to fruition. Yeah, it's not a requirement at the moment, confirmed.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got some questions relating to the tables for CIFCO and the like, the holding companies. The page, yeah, that's why I was looking to buy myself some time, Chair. Sorry, I think it's 34. 34, yes. Because could I request or suggest that some additional information needs to be added to this sort of table, in that it's giving a cumulative net interest received, but it doesn't specify the time period that the 10 million or similar is actually been generated. So it would be helpful to have that included in some shape or form. Also, the overall debt in the situations of CIFCO, and likewise, I guess, with Gateway 14 would be helpful to be added. Because you get the impression that...
As a debate from this, do you?
I was requesting that these tables be further augmented, Chair, if that's possible.
Oh, for future reference, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
for future reference. There's no way that we could get that information in for this particular meeting, but for subsequent meetings.
Yeah, I'm with you now.
Yeah, it would be
Yeah.
helpful to councillors to get the whole picture of these investments, because there's significant changes in valuations of the properties which we purchased in the order of 18 million, which is not transparent in this set of information.
We get that as a report to council, Councillor Davies. You want it better than that, or it is in when CIFCO report to council. There sort of details come out then.
That's true, Chair. Yes. It's just that perhaps I'm incorrect. My assumption is that with this audit meeting, we're looking at all the risks financially that our council is exposed to. And in the case of these holding companies, we're getting information which is very good to look at, but doesn't give the whole picture, in my humble opinion.
Yep, okay. Melissa, is that something you could take?
I think you're looking at it from probably a different perspective here. So this is the council's borrowing and income investment. You'd see that information about the property valuations in the CIFCO business plan that comes forward, and Emily frequently brings forward that update. So that's from a company's point of view. So our risk and our investment is what you're seeing here. That loss of assets is not an impact for the council, if you like it. That's limited to CIFCO, the company itself. So that's where you'd see that information. It's not really relevant for our borrowing, and our interest repayments is the only thing that we get from CIFCO from a council perspective.
Thank you, although perhaps it's not the correct place on the agenda, because the financial risk, since we are the sole shareholder of those companies, still rests with us as a council.
I think you probably see that more in the statement of accounts, where we show our investment, our share of the investment in CIFCO is probably where you would see that more than in this kind of report here.
Thank you. And is it possible to, just looping back to this cumulative net interest received, to give? Thank you.
It helps anyway, I would think.
Thanks, Chair, yes.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, I stopped on this same this same table that Councillor Davies just referred to, and I thought, you know, what are we actually saying here? And I felt as if it would be more understandable. We're getting to these kind of semi-internal transactions. If interest receivable is loans to CIFCO, and interest payable is loans from CIFCO, etc., and the other companies. I know whether that would help to make it more kind of transparent to the lay resident looking at it.
Yeah, we can try and make it a bit clearer. So just for clarification, interest receivable is the loan to CIFCO, and interest payable is the loan the council has with PWLB. So we can try and make it a little bit more understandable in that table, certainly.
If I understood Councillor Davies's question correctly, I think he was asking for interim valuations on CIFCO. Bear in mind this is a half-year report. We wouldn't be expecting our valuers to be doing interim valuations on CIFCO. I think that'd be unreasonable and a mis-expense myself.
Council from CIFCO themselves with the information, and I presume that's still on the internet somewhere, isn't it? The report still exists but you're both Mid-Suffolk councillor, but I presume you get the same info that Baber does, so I presumed it was all there, but I'm sure Melissa, if she can do anything to help or make it clearer, will do so. Any other questions, points to raise? Okay, there was one for me that we did talk about in the briefing, and that's the 84 million loan on the HRA. I don't know when it starts being paid back, but I presume we're putting money aside from the HRA to take care of that when it comes in. I think maybe it's something other members ought to know, because obviously things are going to change when we start paying big lumps back. So maybe for clarity, Melissa, you could just comment on that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So the maturity dates of those HRA, PWB loans go sort of up to 2050. I think there is a table in the report that kind of shows when the maturity is. There's like a graph that shows the points. But what we are doing currently as part of the HRA 30-year business plan is building in when those loans mature and the refinancing that we have to set aside to cover that. So that will all be wrapped up in the affordability of that HRA business plan. So we're looking at the maturity dates and what the refinancing options might be on those loans as they mature.
That's correct, isn't it?
I think it's a little earlier than that, actually. I did just have a look. I think there's one in 2025. So, yeah. Just
right,
have a quick
yes.
look. Yeah.
Yes, I did wonder about 2030. Some of us may not be here then, mightn't we? But, okay, yeah, that was just for clarity. That's obviously we borrowed considerable funds, 84 million from Baber to buy our own houses back effectively. Sorry about that. But, yeah, the day of reckoning will come, so be prepared. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a short thank you from me after my carping recently. On page 14, really quite excited to see that our Treasury team is progressing the ESG options, so that I'm looking forward to seeing those options explained on the January meeting. So thank you, team.
We're looking to progress that, I think, Councillor Davis, at the right time and in the right way. So, yeah, we do have a start. Any more items for debate or questions before we go to the vote? No, we're all clear. Good. Just a little bit of help here, Bethany. We need to take 2 and 3 first. Is that correct? I need a proposer and a seconder for each one, don't I? Which one should I take first, is it? We do the joint one first. Okay. A proposer and seconder for the first one. 3-1, please. I can do that from the chair if you like, and John is, yep. You go the next turn. So I'm proposing, and John Matheson as co-chair is seconding.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress for all members. Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
No. Item 3.2. No, that needs to be a Baber member, obviously, doesn't it? So, oh yes, yep. Mary to propose, Tim to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress for Baber members only. Thank you, Chair. That is 3 votes for. That's carried.
Thank you very much. I'm relieved at that. And item 3.3 for Mid-Suffolk. Alistair to propose, John to second.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress for Mid-Suffolk members only. Thank you, Chair. That is 5 votes for. That's carried.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. JAC 23/13, the midterm internal audit report. And I think that'll be John, I presume. Yes, thank you, John. I've got so many notes here, I'm confusing them, but thank you. Far away.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors. The purpose of this report that you have in front of you is to inform you of the work that Internal Audit have undertaken for the first half year of 2023-24, and it also provides members with a review of the variety and scope of projects and corporate activities which are supported through the work of the team. What I want to do now is just provide you with some of the key messages that I think are important that need to be drawn out from the report for your consideration. Firstly, the unplanned demand on internal audit services to provide assurance, support and guidance on a diverse range of activities has actually formidably increased, which also includes the counter-fraud work. What I would provide members with a level of assurance is that's currently being managed, but just to advise you that we do have a relatively small team that I actually manage, and so obviously additional work can have quite a bit of an impact. As I said, that I am currently managing through various sources, but just to draw your attention to that. In line with the Council's internal audit charter, the work has been conducted to ensure it delivers against the public sector internal audit standards which I'm required to comply with, and also helps me to produce the annual Head of Internal Audit opinion at year end. So the work centres around governance processes, monitoring arrangements, ethical issues, information governance and counter-fraud management. If we move on to the Appendix A, of the work that's completed. Again, I just want to draw your attention to a number of audits that I think that you'll pick up on. So there were 3 reviews that returned an audit opinion on the control environment of limited assurance at the end of the last financial year. That was 2022-23, where actions were outstanding but obviously have been kept under review by the audit team. And I'm pleased to report that management has been very receptive in terms of the recommendations that were made. So they refer to the general ledger audit, the election costs and the safeguarding. So if I take those in that order. So the general ledger piece of work, again, it's useful that Melissa's here, but the work that we produced raised a couple of issues, and it's been agreed with Melissa that those actions will be taken forward as a part of the transformation, the financial transformational work that her and her team are currently undertaken. In terms of the election costs, you would have been aware that there were a number of issues around this, and again I'm very pleased to report that management have taken on board the recommendations from internal audit, and they've embedded those into a very robust action plan that's currently being worked on, and this report will be produced and also circulated to the new elections manager that starts mid-January. In terms of the safeguarding audit, again I'm pleased to report that we did a follow-up and the recommendations following that have actually been implemented. If we move on to this particular year, Again, there were 3 reports with an audit opinion of limited assurance. One was around expenses, which are put through Oracle, and internal audit testing looked at a sample of approved expenses, and we found that in a number of instances the council policies were not always being followed. And I think there may be a reason for this that sits behind it in terms of perhaps a lack of confusion or misunderstanding of where employees consider they're now based, which sort of stems from the COVID, where obviously during a period of time we were asked to work from home. Obviously now that's being lifted and we're actually seeing more staff coming back into the office. But the policies that we're supposed to adhere to still makes Endeavour House our place of employment, not from home, and I think that's where the confusion has arisen, and we're working currently with HR and also Kathy Nixon, the Strategic Director or the Deputy Chief Executive, to form some words that we can actually post out to all staff so they're more akin to our policies. The next area is around procurement cards, and this was service area specific. And again, I'd like to just re-emphasise that some of the areas that we found here weren't material in terms of their value, but there were examples of non-compliance with this policy underspending, lack of accurate descriptions recorded under the items that were purchased, and therefore it really wasn't clear whether we were achieving value for money. These issues within the procurement cards are actually being addressed as a wider piece of work undertaken by the corporate manager. We've also undertaken some work around building services suppliers, and this was a piece of work that was commissioned by the Director of Housing. The processes in place for managing building services suppliers didn't align to the Council's policies, and therefore, again, preventing any assurance that the Council were gaining value for money. The processes for engaging suppliers, completion of work and payment processing have evolved over time, which were found to be slightly disjointed and unwieldy in practice. These recommendations have all been accepted by the Director of Housing, and again, they are being put in place as we speak now. As well as conducting a number of audit reviews, internal audit have also had significant involvement within a period in a variety of different council activities, which include leading on the production of the annual governance statement for 2022-23, attending the Council Statutory Officers Working Group, which I attend under professional guidance in terms of my governance expertise. Also work around the anti-fraud and corruption, and this report it's an annual report, and it will come to this committee and be presented by myself in March. And there's also a number of, as you'll probably be aware of, government initiatives around business grants, and a member of my team helps and supports that business cell, and again that's quite lengthy in terms of resources, and obviously we're now looking at the flood relief payments as well, and again my member of staff is heavily involved in that to ensure that those payments reach the right people, and there's due diligence checks that sit behind that. There are no additional issues relating to this report, so I'm happy now to take questions. Thank you.
Right, thank you, John. On the 3 with the limited assurance, you're confident that these will be sorted out in this current year, are you? Which we're sort of halfway through already, aren't we, really?
Yes, Chair. So part of the process where a piece of work, an audit work, has been given a limited assurance or poor assurance, we do follow up on those recommendations. And I can provide assurance to these members today that all the recommendations that are being forwarded have been accepted by management. So it's a case of following those up at the required time and then reporting that at year end.
Yeah, thank you. Is this again a resource issue, staff to do the work? Is it largely, you say you've got a small team, and that's obviously a problem, is it?
It is. We tend to cut our cloth accordingly, so I can shave days off other audits without having a significant impact on the control environment that we test. But obviously, the more reports that come out, limited assurance, that more work has to be required to put into the follow-up work. But as I said, at the moment, it's manageable. But as I said, I just wanted to raise this particular point to members today.
Are we actively trying to recruit back up another member of staff, or maybe not then?
I would look in Melissa's direction, but probably Melissa wouldn't look back.
No, okay. Well, I think the question was, John has got a small team. They're obviously struggling to do everything in time, and some of this may have risen through a lack of staff in the first place. So my question was, are we trying to get back up? Are we trying to recruit staff, or financially that may not be possible? I just think to set the scene for the question to debate, it's nice to know things from the front, Melissa.
I think obviously across the council, you know, directors are responsible and corporate managers are responsible for resourcing their teams accordingly, whether that be like John's done with a contract through TIA or internal staff. So it's not really something, you know, we haven't got like a vacancy freeze or anything like that, but obviously it is challenging to recruit to vacant posts at the moment, and I can speak from experience in my service area, where I'm finding it very challenging to get the right people in. So.
Yeah, I think we're mindful of that. Nobody wants to be an auditor anymore, do they, nationally or locally? Yeah, sad. Okay, well that's the basis of where we are, councillors. Questions from the floor, please. Yeah, Councillor Register, you were first, far away.
I thought I knew procurement. Can you explain procurement cards? Because I don't know this term.
Sorry, I looked at Melissa because I didn't know whether, excuse me, Melissa was going to answer that, but it's effectively like credit cards, and there are limits set to that, and there are authorisation limits, and those people that are given procurement cards have to sign an undertaking to comply with policies associated with those cards.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a few, but on the if we could look at page 43 first, the actual risk management of the what we're looking at, with the point about unplanned demand, which comes through, and the small team only point, and of course I've asked about that a few times over the years. I just wonder whether actually the likelihood of the risk of slippage is actually 3, not just unlikely. It sounds like it's actually quite likely, given the number of sort of additional things which are quite rightly being that departments are asking for internal audit. Can you have a look at this that we intended to do, please? Which is essentially what unplanned work is. You know, I just wonder whether actually that, if that was 3, then the risk register would be saying a bit more loudly to the corporate managers, to the director and the chief executive, that we do need to expand this team a little bit if we possibly can. Really, there's a comment on that.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Councillor. As I said sort of in my introduction, the unplanned work is increasing, but at the moment I would consider it to be manageable. And as with any internal audit programme or what you approve at the beginning of the year, there is a degree of flexibility and it's all risk-based. So I would then make a judgment in terms of meeting expectations, particularly for management, where a lot of the work would come from, in terms, can we do it? And if I deem it to be sufficiently high risk that could have an adverse effect on the council, then some of those audits that we'd been prior to have been agreed would slip down the list, if that makes sense, in terms of their order. But that would be a judgment for myself. If I felt we got to a particular point where it would impact on my annual audit opinion, then that's when I'd be raising it through proper channels and raising it through SLT. And then if I still had concerns, obviously I'd be raising it here with members today. But at the moment, it's manageable, and I can cut my cloth accordingly without having a significant impact. But what I wanted to do is just raise it, that there's a lot more that's being placed on a relatively small team, just for your attention at this stage. But at this stage, I'm still happy that the scoring remains as 2. However, if that changed, then obviously I could escalate that to 3 and raise it through the proper channels.
Is that subject effectively just continuous review?
All through the year, because there's continuous requests and demands put on internal audit, and I have to manage expectations. So I have, in fairness, turned people away and saying, actually, I'm sorry, in terms of risk, that's not a high risk on my radar, in terms of the council exposure, and that's my professional judgment. And others that I will cut accordingly. As I said, the Director of Housing came through and asked for additional work around building services, and bearing in mind the situation there, that deemed to be, that work was necessary.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'll rate it as a 2.5, I think. Thank you.
As John's saying, there is a cost of staff which somebody has to pay for, probably the council taxpayers at the end of the day, hence it's a higher up decision. But yeah, thank you, John. You're obviously doing your best and trying to get an order and keep all the balls in the air. Councillor Marriott, please.
Hello. I see, obviously probably related to the few staff that you've got. I see several of the audits, you've identified good practice, but then there are no further actions listed. I just wanted to refer, though, to the audit around Register of Gifts, Interests and Hospitality. As a newcomer to the council, I'm sort of not really familiar with the processes involved in that, and I'm really surprised to some extent that people are allowed to take gifts. And is there any guidance as to what gifts it is appropriate to take? Is there sort of any pre-approval of taking gifts and hospitality? Is there any line manager involvement?
Are we talking staff and members, or just staff?
Both, I guess.
My ultimate sort of advice was don't accept. Then you're not compromised, or the perception of being compromised. I do appreciate that sometimes it's very difficult and very awkward not to receive gifts, but if you do have to receive them, obviously there is a process in terms of recording those. And again, after each of the meetings, you will ask in terms of declarations of interest. So that's an opportunity every time that you come to a committee or cabinet or council to then raise those. But there is guidance within members' guidance on gifts and hospitalities and declarations of interest. Similarly, it is with officers as well. I can take this offline, and perhaps myself and Jan can give you a little bit more detail that sits behind that if you wish. But my first response would be, I would recommend that you don't accept gifts or hospitality, to be honest, even though it might be slightly awkward, embarrassing by telling the person who's perhaps being genuine that you can't because of your position and the perception that might be seen by others.
Thank you.
When we're elected, we all get a do's and don'ts sheet in the pack, I would think. Yes, Jan is nodding. So basically, please don't take any brown envelopes or anything else. Okay, Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got two others. One is on the election costs. I wonder whether there's any confirmation we can get now that the arguments and disputes coming from parish councils on the subject have all been satisfactorily resolved.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just come in on that. So we've had a few, not many disputes. Most of them now are resolved. I think we've just got one outstanding.
Yeah, last one. I was just wondering. This is again on the risk management. The reporting, this is the second one, issues raised by internal audit appropriately actioned or not appropriately actioned, etc. So the reporting, I just wondered what the actual reporting arrangement is for all, you know, sort of negative audit findings. You know, who are they reported to and how frequently?
Thank you, Councillor. So every piece of work, excuse me, will result in an audit report. Now, depending on the findings, the priority ratings and the degree of risk will depend in terms of the audience. So what would normally happen, the auditee will receive the report, the corporate manager will receive the report. Where we have limited assurance or poor, that will be escalated up to the director. And we only had a conversation at SLT the other day where whether those reports need to be presented by myself, stroke the director, around full SLT. And that's something that Arthur is going to have a look at and come back to me on. But I can assure you that any report that has a priority 1 rating, limited assurance, gets escalated up to the director and is followed up and gets reported on back at this committee.
Councillor McLaren, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say, first of all, John, thank you for a very comprehensive report. But I do have some concerns. If we go with the premise that risk management is everybody's business, then that is everybody in the organisation. And some of the things in your report that were identified were actually knowledge and competence of staff, or the processes that were identified that were not. Which for you, in that report, which of those two things is probably the premier concern? Thank you.
I think, and again, touching upon what Melissa was saying, and I think raised by the chair about resources, some of the issues that we have found, there has been changes in staff. And if I'm being brutally honest to you guys here today, I think sometimes the handover arrangements from a person that's just about to leave and a new member being appointed coming in, I don't think are quite as good as they need to be. So they're picking up stuff and there's obviously some errors that don't get addressed straight away, but they do further on down the line. So my sense, you know, it's around about staffing, having the right caliber staff with the right skill sets to do the job. We're all under a huge amount of pressure, as members, you are as well. But that'd be one sort of concern that I would have, that sometimes we have relatively new members of staff that come in. We also have a number of interims as well that will come in, do a job, won't necessarily pass that knowledge base on to staff and then leave. And then we're almost back to square one. So there is something, I think, as an organisation we need to learn from, particularly with the handover arrangements, which I think are crucial to ensure that sort of continuity of business and making sure that those the control environment isn't weakened in any way.
Thank you, John.
Taking up on that, another point, how seamlessly is the remote staff and the in-house staff, does that cause a problem, or is that working as well as it can be?
I think it's very much, as a corporate manager myself, it's down to myself and directors to make sure that there is a presence. Now, whether you're working from home or in the office, I think one of the benefits I found personally is coming into the office now probably a couple of days a week is what I missed by working at home was that rich intelligence about bumping into people at the coffee machine, sitting, you know, around my colleagues, picking up conversations. Sometimes you don't get that if you're working from home. But my sense is that it's down to the corporate manager to make sure that their staff that they're responsible for have that knowledge base And if they feel it's slipping in any way, then that needs to be addressed. But I do appreciate that some people prefer, because of COVID, like to work from home. But it's important that we don't lose that knowledge if they're remotely working as opposed to occasionally coming into the office. And I think from a health and well-being, there's all sorts of issues here. From a health and well-being, I think it's quite healthy to come in and actually have those conversations, not just work solitary from home.
Yes, it's not really a question, it's a statement, John. I think sometimes if there's a team and maybe the head of the team is in-house and some of the staff aren't, or vice versa, I think you do lose something. But there are huge benefits to allowing staff to work from home as well, but we've just got to get the best of both, haven't we?
And I think as well, there's a responsibility from all of us to share knowledge when we have it.
Yes.
You know, whatever location we're working from.
Yes. All the best tips are picked up over the coffee machine.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's just a point, members, that we must be careful not to lose the bonhomie, really, between staff and even councillors when they come in. There's a lot to be said for good interaction. Councillor Register, please.
Taking up that last point, do any of the departments operate their own shared resource or wiki, as I would call it in my business, so that people, if you want to find out how something operates or how a process works or the funding for something, then you can, the knowledge of previous people is put in there so that you can retrieve that data when you need. And if that isn't being done by anyone, is there possibly a requirement, a need to do that, set that up?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly if we found that in our internal audit reports, that would be raised when we're talking about the handover arrangements, and we have in the past raised that very issue. So again, it's down the responsibility of management, whatever level, to ensure when new staff come in that the policies and procedures that are operating to are correctly fed, so they have that knowledge base to hit the sort of road running. As I said, it's not always happened in the past, and that's what I've mentioned before, where there is a slight risk of that happening. So, as I said, I think from an organisational point of view, yes, there are some lessons to be learnt in that aspect, but I think, you know, as long as we take responsibility and we know when people are going to be leaving and when people are going to be joining the organisation, it's down to managers like myself to make sure that the new member of staff has the correct tools to actually do the job.
Councillor Whitehead, please.
Thank you. Looking at page 50, that sets out the table. It sort of defines the audit opinions from substantial through to reasonable, limited and no assurance. I mean, obviously it's correct to focus on the limited assurance where you might have significant gaps, weaknesses or non-compliance. But my question really is to corporate manager is, this time we seem to have no reports coming through with substantial assurance. And so I guess the question for us, perhaps the new committee is reasonable assurance reasonable, or should we be, you know, looking more for substantial assurance across the board? What should the aspirations of the committee and perhaps even the wider council be in terms of going between reasonable and substantial?
That's a very sort of open question, not just for me to answer. I mean, in an ideal world, yes, everything would be lovely if it was substantial assurance. Invariably, I have to be careful what I'm going to say here, because I never like to give substantial assurance because we do limited testing. So we're not doing 100% testing, we only do limited testing. So I'm very reluctant to say and report to members here that everything has a substantial assurance, because I think that would be unwise. I think in terms of caution, I tend to put it more reasonable. If we found something in terms of our principle and testing to be absolutely perfect, then I don't have any hesitation on giving substantial assurance. But generally we will find odd things that just haven't been quite right, whether it's dotting of an I, crossing of a T, and therefore I can't put it substantial assurance. I think it's always slightly dangerous, and I know colleagues, my fellow colleagues in the audit world will probably share that slight concern. If you start putting things of substantial assurance, you have to be pretty sure that everything is perfect, and we don't have the resources to do a 100% check, so that's why I'm very reluctant to perhaps put substantial assurance, to give that an opinion moving forwards.
Because I think where we use the term substantial, I think East Suffolk used the term effective and West Suffolk used the term good. So they all share the term reasonable, but effective, good, or substantial. Do you think their definitions are perhaps weaker than yours in terms of substantial? Is this sort of aspiration that's very high?
In terms of the actual audit opinions, it wasn't that long ago that I belonged to a Suffolk-wide group, heads of audit, and we actually started looking at what opinions each of us were giving. And this is actually built around SITFA's opinions. So we've adopted those and many of the others. I think there are one or two that are slight differences, but when you look at a reasonable, when you look at the definition of what's being put, it's not too dissimilar at all. There might be some put effective, I put a reasonable, but most of us within Suffolk put reasonable. One or two, I think, might put effective, but effectively, sorry?
Effective was the top one, Suffolk. And good was the top one. They all use the term reasonable.
Yeah.
But when you use substantial, they say effective and others say good.
I think in some ways it's a play on words. I think I'd be more interested in the actual definition that sits behind it.
Thank you, Chair. One thing I've sort of noticed on the health of the organisation chart that we're looking at, and I highlighted this as well on our last meeting when we were looking at the elections report and the issues that we have with the elections, is that the follow-up dates, well, there are no dates, but the sort of the follow-up action is always very vague. So no one seems to sort of take responsibility of when things need to be done by. And it would be, this is a midterm report. So the follow-up action, it's just there's a general 23-24. But if this is a midterm report, that means we know when the full report is coming out. So it'd be very easy to put a date on it. So how can we properly audit and sort of manage and supervise if we've got no end goals, if we've got no standard set? And also, we don't really know who's doing the follow-up actions as well. It's quite a, you look at some of these things in isolation, and we don't know where it's come from, who's following it up, who we need to be chasing up to properly audit. So I think what we need is a RACI matrix, a RACI diagram. Is everyone happy what I mean by a RACI matrix?
I think you'll need to explain to some of the officers and also members.
Okay, so that's fine. So it's quite common in business and in government. A RACI matrix is RACI. Who is responsible, accountable, who is consulted, who is informed. And we do use it for some things, I think, in BMSD. But this would be a good example on definitely on audit of where we should have follow-up dates, a set-in-stone date where the sort of managers and directors can assess something by, and then in conjunction with the RACI matrix, us as councillors, we know who's actually responsible for doing that follow-up action, and also who's in that chain. So yeah, it's sort of adding more meat to the bone, because otherwise it seems that responsibility, accountability, culpability is just sort of diluted and gone, and we don't actually, we don't know who these people are and when they're going to do these things by the follow-up action.
Your comment on that, John?
Excuse me, I think what the councillor's talking about with what you've just mentioned would be in our reports. You would have to have the whole report. I can summarise it, particularly for those that have come up with a limited assurance that I can, but internal audit would follow it up we would have ownership of the recommendations for follow-up, and we can have some timeframes, as the councillor was saying, for follow-up. So I can provide those moving forwards, certainly, if that would help you. Otherwise, you'll have an unwieldy report that's going to run into pages and pages, and there are some sensitive stuff there that I'd be a little bit concerned about sharing in the wider audience, to be perfectly honest. So, but I understand where the councillor is coming from, so I can provide that little bit more detail. Otherwise, you're going to have the whole report. But what the councillor is saying is would be included in the actual report itself that we could then manage. So I'm happy to do that, councillor.
At the end, isn't it? It's a bunch of work that will be done when it's done, you're saying?
Each of those recommendations, as I said, has ownership, and there's a time frame associated with that. So the report, the 3 reports for this year, will be reported at year end anyway, to give you that, provide that level of assurance that we have actually followed up. But I understand where the councillor is coming from. So providing this, I can actually put a little bit more meat to the bones, if you like, to give obviously councillors assurance that there is clear responsibility and ownership and a time frame associated with those recommendations.
Okay, you're happy with that, Councillor Patchett, as it is? Right, thank you. Any other questions or debate to take place? No, well, we'll move to the noting then, please. I need a proposer and a seconder to note this, Bethany, that's correct, isn't it? Yeah, John is proposing, Councillor Register, Tim is seconding.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress.
Bethany will write down what we say. So that's the start of a steer if there's something you're not entirely happy with. You're struggling?
Councillor McLaren, may I take your vote verbally? Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Well, I'm mindful that a couple of councillors have got to leave, I think, before the end of the meeting. So moving on to 23/14, the annual risk management strategy update. And if I remember, that's Teresa to take that. Is that correct? Or Alistair first, isn't it? Andy, sorry. Go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'm jointly presenting this this report with my colleague Alistair McCraw, who's the portfolio holder responsible at BABA, and then we have officers Joe Hobbs, who's corporate manager of the Strategic Policy Unit, Teresa Fairburn, who's the risk management lead, and then Sarah Wilcock, who's the director under which this all sits. So I'll kick off and then I'll hand over to Alistair to complete the picture. So this risk management paper sets out the context and provides an update, particularly for new members of the committee. In summary, over the last couple of years, the Council has moved risk management away from audit into a new unit for strategic policy. And we've also in that time adopted the risk management principles that are set out in His Majesty's Government's Orange Book, which is the Management of Risk Principles and Concepts. I would describe us as being on a journey of transformation and improvement, and on that journey we are using the recommendations from 2 places. One is the process of audit, which is carried out by TIA, who are our business assurance providers, and the second one is the outcomes of our corporate peer challenge, which happened in 2022. Now this is where we had as a council, we invited in a team of officers and councillors from other councils, organised by the LGA as a challenge to our organisation, and we're still working through those recommendations. So the work still to be done from these recommendations is that Cabinet members, in particular portfolio holders, need to become familiar with the risk register as it applies to their portfolios. and both cabinets have a presentation on risk coming to cabinet briefing on the 12th of December. And from this, each cabinet will develop a risk appetite statement, and there's various levels of risk which are detailed on page 66 of the risk management policy and statement, which is attached to Appendix 1. So there are 5 levels of risk from averse to eager. We also need to do some work in finance to review our financial assurance thresholds and also improve our financial risk analysis. Now, members of the Joint Audit and Committee have asked previously for more information about our company's risk arrangements. We have, as you know, Mid Suffolk and Baber Holdings, we have Mid Suffolk Growth, Gateway 14 and Sifco. Paragraphs 4.16 through to 4.16.6 give details of the arrangements for managing risk within the companies, and the risk is spread across the directors, the board meetings, the company's risk panel, which meets quarterly. But I think the key point is this, at paragraph 4.16.5, whilst the companies manage their own risks, risks posed by the companies to the councils are managed through the Joint Strategic Risk Register. So I hope that covers off that point. But I'll hand over to Alistair to add some more detail.
Thanks very much, Andy. Yes, if Andy's doing the play-by-play, I'm here for the colour. Commentary, book-wise. Just wanted to emphasise for new members that this approach to risk management introduced a year ago is a systematic approach, whereas perhaps in the past it might be said that the risk assessments or risk analysis was a little bit more amorphous, with each directorate having its own assessments. The Orange Book and our risk management strategy go at this in a systematic way. And as an example, and I'd like to bring it up specifically because it addresses a point made by Councillor Matheson on an earlier item, just taking one item, the risk matrix and the scoring criteria. Should it be a 2, 2.5 or a 3? And here we have a systematic explanation of where the levels lie in likelihood, probability, impact and consequence. And those obviously are capable of being reviewed and should be reviewed and will be reviewed. But the point I'm making is that rather than being objective, it can be said to be properly subjective. And I think that's a useful discipline for the entire council. And the idea is to embed a risk management approach in each and every directorate. As I say, we're in the first year of that. It's an ongoing process. You can see the circular diagram in the report. And I actually think we've come up with a really good piece of work, but it's not static. It's a living document, and that's part of our job as councillors and your job to keep us on board to make sure that we have it embedded in the council. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for the outline there, councillors. And just want to add that we hope that this paper gives the committee here today assurance that the risk is being taken seriously and the right mechanisms are in place to have that assurance. Because ultimately we need to make sure that we have the right frameworks in place to assess risk so that it can be then carried out throughout the council. So we hope that this update to the committee today gives you that assurance that this is happening. Thank you, Chair.
Moving to questions. Any points to raise, please? Are we all happy? Councillor Matheson?
Yeah, I think more in the manner of observations and questions, Chair, if I may. I've always felt, from when I first saw the council's risk registers quite a few years ago, that we all, and by all I mean all members, constitutionally we are the council, and the council has these risks, and I think that identifying them in the sense that all members understand that they have a share of that risk in that sense is very important. And you know, I was just trying to remember, you know, quite a long time ago now, a particular risk was identified probably by internal audit in the first place, that we weren't looking at our trees, the trees that were on council land. And when they were looked at, it turns out there was a lot of things that might fall down on people, and the risks were very real and very serious. And I think at that time it was going to the scrutiny committee, and the scrutiny committee came back at the next meeting and then the next meeting and said, you know, have you done this yet? Have you done this yet? So I think that getting more members to understand that it is our risks is very important. And so I wanted to propose that we organise further risk training for committee members, but also that we make it available to all the other members. So that's what I would really like to see us do.
Several questions in there. That was more of a debate, actually, wasn't it? But Joe, would you like to pick some of those out of that, please?
Yes, and yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Matheson. And yes, certainly we'd be very happy to provide that further training to members of Just Committee and any other councillors who wish to take that training offer up as well. Ultimately, yes, it's everyone's concern risk. It's a process to make sure that you have assurance as councillors that the things that might keep you awake at night are being adequately managed, and that there is a mitigation plan in place for those risks. So yes, the engagement with that is always welcomed. So yes, we can provide that training.
We could build that into the recommendation at the end. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say what a comprehensive strategy it is? But if we think back to the previous item on the agenda, which was about risk management being everybody's business, this is quite a large document. How are we going to ensure that staff are fully cognizant with it and put it into practice? I'm just thinking of the part-time member of staff. We talked about people working from home, but they're just as responsible to ensure that this happens. How are we going to address that challenge? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren, for your question. We have recently built a risk management portal, and on the risk management portal we've got comprehensive training and guidance. We want that to be available to everybody, members and officers. And I am working with directorates and services and individuals across both councils to provide bespoke training and workshops wherever necessary. So we're not going for a sort of one-stop shop. We're trying to accommodate different learning styles and different context as well, because different services have got different requirements.
Marriott, please.
Hello, regarding Number 9 risk register system, page 74, the de-escalation of risks, and they are de-escalated to service area programme or company risk registers for onward operational management. I just wonder, are these de-escalated risks revisited strategically at any time? You know, it would be quite easy to say, well, you know, is this solved? You know, this isn't going to happen again. But as it has been a past risk, is there sort of any policy of occasionally revisiting them?
Thank you very much, Councillor. So de-escalated risks, when they go back to an operational or a programme risk register, they will be under constant surveillance, so they're not necessarily going to be closed. So we have directorate meetings monthly where corporate managers will bring those risk registers up for discussion with their colleagues and with the director, and so they're constantly under surveillance. So if they need to be escalated again, they can be. So we're constantly vigilant about what's on the risk registers. And we've got a new system coming in, Pentana Risk, which will help us look across risk registers rather than just looking at them in silos, so we'll have even more visibility.
Thank you.
Questions, please? No? No points to make in debate? We've had several in the questions, haven't we? So we've covered two in one, really. Okay, well, we move to the electronic vote. Now, this is for just recommendations, isn't it, Bethany? And we've had, and by magic, what I suggested has appeared on the voting piece. Thank you. Yes, proposer and seconder, please. I can propose this and just look for a seconder. Councillor Register. Yep, that's fine. And we've had a bit added on to what we're recommending, and I think that covers most things. How do you propose, Joe, we do that? You set out a timetable and maybe an online training, or after another meeting, what would suit officers best?
Yes, I think we can go in, come up with a bit of an offer on that, and then circulate it to members, and then in discussion with yourselves and also our cabinet members, just to make sure that that's the right level of training. But we will go away and then come up with a proposal to circulate to members.
Yes, that sounds very practical and common sense. How do members feel? Add it on to for an hour after the next meeting. Would you be happy with that? It's nice to be able to talk about it as well as sit online and do it virtually, isn't it? So, maybe possible with a January meeting, or is that too short time frame?
I think that hour would be a good starting point, and then we can take it from there, really, and see if there's anything further we needed to explore.
Okay. So we're voting on that also, which I think is a really good strategy. Okay, it's all in blue, so please cast your votes.
Yeah, that vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Bethany. We'll progress now on to 2315. Update on previous year's financial situation. And that will be Melissa, won't it? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've provided this briefing update because I think it was a request from Councillor Matheson, and I think it's right that you see the situation of where we are with our accounts and the outstanding audits that we have. The last accounts we had audited were the 2019-20 accounts, so EY are our auditors, and that was the last opinion that we had given on our accounts. Now, this committee would normally see those audit plans and the audit opinions and also the statement of accounts, so it's something you haven't got into a cycle of seeing yet because of the state of where we are with the audits. And I think you can see in the report we set out at paragraph, just get to the right place, so 2.3 and 2.4 we talk about kind of where the state of things are, and we're not alone. You can see there a figure of 918 delayed audits across the country, so I would say we're in good company, but it's not a great situation to have that many accounts unaudited. I think the situation, the latest that I've heard, is that EY will probably give limited assurance on those outstanding audits that are open, if you like, but they will provide a value for money conclusion, probably on the 22-23 audits. I think it's fair to say that this committee should take assurance from the work that John Snell's already alluded to in terms of the audit plan and the internal audit work that's done on the key financial controls. In addition to that, we do regularly report the quarterly financial performance, and we have the prudential indicators in there. We also, as part of the report you've seen this morning, where we're adhering to our Treasury code and our strategy as well. So I think there are checks and balances there to make sure that we are doing things correctly, but obviously it's not an ideal situation to have 4 years unaudited accounts kicking around, and it does impact on the team as well. So The auditors are likely to come back in January to do the 2020-21 audit. We're still trying to close the 22-23 accounts and publish those as well. So, and it's the same people that are working on all of this. So as they're responding to auditors' queries, they're trying to do the accounts as well. So it is putting a lot of pressure on the team that are already struggling as well. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that update really for your awareness, so that you know the situation, and if you're talking to colleagues who across other councils are talking about similar things, hopefully you're informed enough to know what the picture is. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Really, is it? Because without audit we don't get a steer either, do we? So if something is wrong, it can be wrong twice. We all hope and pray it's, and sure it's not, but it's a bit working blind. Councillors, what are your views? Councillor Register first.
I just find it astonishing that they still haven't released audited accounts for so long ago, and we're trying to work out the budget for 24-25. In any other business, the Companies House would have gone spare by now, wouldn't they? Or if it was a charity, the Charities Commission would have fined. And yet, it seems every local authority is in the same boat. Are these auditing companies just short of staff, or short of skills, or just short of everything, really, and just can't work with the local authorities and do the work in a reasonable timescale?
Is every briefing, Councillor Register? It's not natural progression, is it? But everybody assures me they're doing the best. It's almost a government thing, really, isn't it, at a higher level? But Melissa, please reassure us.
Yeah, I think nationally there is staffing issues. I know all of the audit firms are struggling, and particularly local government audit is very different to private sector auditing. So I think they are struggling to recruit people to those roles. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I heard last week that PricewaterhouseCoopers are laying off auditors. It's bonkers, isn't it? If they're doing some of this auditing and they're laying off auditors, what on earth is going on?
Is that the private sector pays more and than local government do, I would imagine, is one of the problems. Councillor McLaren, I thought I saw another hand up. Yes, yep. Councillor McLaren first.
Thank you, Chair. Melissa, we've been talking about audit and assessing performance and all that. Say we found fraud, would that be impacted by this late system, or would there be a conflict? Or
I think it's probably more likely to be picked up through internal audit if there was a fraud. I think, rest assured that that's the work that John and Tia do. So, yeah, I don't think So EY kind of focus on how we've accounted for things and made sure that we've treated things right under the international financial reporting standards to make sure that presentationally our accounts give a true and fair view. So it's not necessarily looking at fraud, it's presentationally have we accounted for things correctly in the accounts, if you like.
Thank you, Melissa.
Councillor Davies, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, Melissa, when do you think our council will have actually got up and had fully audited accounts for all the years?
That's a very difficult question to answer, and I would like to be able to give you an answer, but if EY are coming back in January to do the 2021 audits, we've still to have the conversation about whether they will do a light touch for those other ones in between, or whether they will focus on the value for money conclusion, which does tie in nicely to the budget setting as well. It's how financially sustainable are we, and what are we doing to make sure we are. So yeah, sorry, I honestly couldn't answer. I wish I could.
Business, if you're in trouble, you'd have 2 years to catch up, but it doesn't work that way. Well, and we may never catch up, to be honest. That's the frightening thing. We may just end up working years behind. It's not great. It really isn't. It's not good not to have a steer as to where we're going, and if something is wrong, we just live with it. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, firstly, thanks for bringing this briefing so that everybody and the public, I mean, I think that the public perception is an issue here as well. Fortunately, we haven't seemed to have had any Mid-Suffolk citizens that have been asking awkward questions about this recently, but they did a few years ago when we started to get into this cycle of delay, and then we failed to meet the date that was set out for the first time. And someone was chasing us at that point, but to make it clear where the situation is. Now, since I became chair, joint chair, I have managed to attend a couple of webinars where a government, well, the intermediaries that are set out, you know, PSA, AA and so on, have sought to offer a briefing as to where this is going and what they're trying to do to resolve it and so on. And the government say they are going to make some proposals about how to resolve this, and Melissa is you know, hinting at some of those that our particular auditor has talked about. But as far as I know, and as of about 4 or 5 weeks ago, the government hadn't decided what to do about this. So we are in that uncomfortable place, and I share, you know, I wanted new members to understand this situation, that it isn't particularly one of our making, but it is an uncomfortable place to be. So we'll no doubt we'll get another briefing on that when it changes. Thank you.
Which government do you think will be doing this?
No comment.
No. As co-chair, Melissa, something I often think about, if the council took on an ambitious project that needed financing, would the fact we've got no audited accounts for 2 years make a difference to that? You can't get a bank loan if you've got no audited accounts. So I know council's a bit different and there's a reason for it, but I just wonder sometimes, is that a weak link? Would it make a difference?
I don't think so, because obviously, you know, we have our credit rating for borrowing from other local authorities, and obviously we've got PWB borrowing in there as well. So I don't think having unaudited accounts particularly plays, but it would be something I think people would be thinking about as a risk, particularly with more councils, you know, issuing Section 114 notices as well. You know, this is just another thing that will not give you comfort, I think, if you were looking for it to invest in or to lend some money to a council. So directly no, but indirectly probably yes.
Okay, thank you. You've been very honest, Melissa, but I'm sure myself and my co-chair will be raising this at every briefing, as we would, but we realise you're doing the best. Yeah, thank you, members. Any other points, Councillor Whitehead?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really beggars belief that these big 4 accounting companies, you know, can't carry out these audits, because not only do they do local authority audits, but they do company audits from the smallest to the biggest. And a limited company, well, a company quoted on the stock exchange, if they don't have their accounts signed off and filed in 6 months, the shares are suspended, and that happens very, very occasionally. So the same big firms that seem incapable of auditing local authorities are quite clearly able to audit companies and take the money. And I mean, most of these big firm partners take home £1 million a year and stuff. I think it's quite appalling, really, that they got into this stage, really.
Yeah, no further questions.
One other observation that comes to mind, really, very limited but a bit more reassurance for members and the public. Our various council-owned companies have got up-to-date audits, external audits in place and signed off, which is well, or they would be in trouble with Companies House, yes.
I think we're just all feeling we don't want anything to go seriously wrong on our watch, so we will keep pushing and pressurising. Okay, that's just for noting, isn't it? Yeah, we don't need a vote on that. Forward plan, last but one item, 2315, and that is, who was presenting that? Is that Teresa, is it? Just for looking at and noting. Are you happy with that?
Oh yeah, Chair, there was. Sorry, yeah, there was that one point we wanted to make, that the minutes of the last meeting said that the committee would like to see the environmental social governance matter brought back to the next meeting, which is today, but this discussion with the director and cabinet member suggested very clearly that the right time to be discussing that would be with the Treasury management strategy, which is at the January meeting. So I think that's just to reassure ourselves that that is coming forward at the next meeting.
Right, thank you. So we're all happy with the forward plan. That just leaves us to note and agree the confidential minutes. Now, if we can just do it on a show of hands. If you want to talk about it, we have to go into part two, but I understand that you're happy with what was... I wasn't here, so I can't comment or enlarge myself, but it looks perfect to me, so if we can agree that, then I'll be happy with that. Yes, somebody ought to other than me. Yes, John to propose and Councillor Register Tim to second. So can we need a vote on that, do we? Yeah. Bethany, yep. Just give us a minute and it'll be there, I'm sure.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 7 votes for and 1 abstention, so that's carried.
And for your diligence, and councillors, have a good Christmas and a great New Year. See you in January.